Hi there, this is Mina with Glimmer Glassworks. This tutorial is specifically for my DIY stained glass kit with pre-cut glass, so we're going to get right to foiling. So we're going to grab our copper foil and we're going to peel a small piece back. The silver is sticky and that's the part we're going to put on our glass. So let's grab our glass, we're going to hold it vertical so the edge is facing us, and we're going to stick the glass on the copper tape. We're going to make sure that it's centered in the middle so that it's equal space on both sides. Then we're going to slowly wrap it around the glass, keeping it centered. I like to use my finger holding the back like that and just slowly move it along, sticking it to the edge and keeping it centered on the tape. Make sure not to push down the sides quite yet, we're just sticking it to the edge. Once we've made it all the way around, we're going to overlap it just a little bit with where we started. And then we're going to grab our scissors and cut it. Now we have these straight sides. We can use our fingers to pinch the copper foil down. We'll do this all the way around. We're going to leave our inside curve alone, but we can do our outside curves and pinch those down. We're then going to grab our FID and we're going to start working on those curves. So we're just going to slowly, with light pressure, go back and forth and angle the FID. So we're just slowly pushing it down to the glass. We're trying to avoid tearing the copper tape, so we're just trying to slowly stretch it out. Then we're going to use our FID and go all the way around, push down the corners, and get the copper tape smooth all over the glass. We'll do it on the edges as well. I like to put it on the table so that I can get a good pressure and get it nice and flat. And here's our piece all foiled, nice and smooth across both sides. And we're going to do this for the rest of our pieces. Once everything is foiled, we're going to prepare to solder. So we'll put our piece in the correct pattern. And you're going to want to have a fan in your room facing towards you or the window open. I have a fume extractor, but it's not necessary. And then we're going to grab our soldering iron. If it's temperature controlled, I like to set mine to 410. And then we're going to wet our sponge. This is so that we can wipe our soldering iron if it's getting dirty. And then we're going to grab our flux. This is a liquid we're going to put on our glass, which helps the solder stick to the copper foil. And then we're going to grab our solder. So we'll open up our flux and then use our brush to put a thin layer all over the copper foil lines. Once your iron is all heated up, we're going to grab it with our right hand and our solder in our left hand. And we're going to start by tacking the piece together. So we're just going to grab small globs of solder and put them in places to connect the pieces of glass together. This is just so when we start soldering, our pieces are all connected and we don't have to worry about it moving around. Don't worry about any solder that gets on the glass or gets in an area you're not wanting to. We can clean it up later. Make sure you're keeping your iron moving at all times. If you keep it in one spot for too long, you can crack the glass. Now we're going to start soldering. So we're going to put our solder down where we want to start, and then we're going to put our soldering iron behind it. Let it warm up, and then we're going to just slowly bead it along the path. We're trying to get a nice bead, and then we're going to connect it to our tacking point and just continue. Once we finish all the interior, we're going to tin the edges. So we're going to put flux all around the edge. Tinning is just a very thin layer of solder. So we're just going to grab another small glob again, and we're going to wipe it around the edge. It does not need to be thick. Don't worry about if anything falls off the edge, we'll clean it up later. Once you finish the first side, we're going to let it cool for a little bit. It is hot to handle, so you want to let it cool down so you can touch it. And then we're going to flip it over and work on the other side. If you're struggling with the method of feeding the solder into the iron, you can try a different method, which is to put the small globs of solder next to each other, like we did with the tacking, but put them much closer. Then once you have them down, we can just use the iron and melt them all together. Once you've finished the interior, you can go ahead and tin the edge again, and then we're going to let it cool down to touch again. For this next step, I like to wear gloves just because I don't like the feeling of the flux on my hands, but you're going to have to be holding the stained glass piece while it is hot, so you're going to need a cloth to hold it with your left hand or a thick glove. Then we're going to pick up our piece and hold it vertical, and we're going to grab our soldering iron and we're going to tin the edge. If you already have a whole bunch of globs of solder on the edge, you can just melt those and pull it around. Be careful to hold it at a little bit of an angle just because the solder can drip off if you have a lot on there and you don't want it to drip on you. If you don't have solder on the edge enough to wipe it around, you can just grab small globs like we did previously. Now, if you're up for a little bit of a challenge, we can try beating the side. This does require an iron that lowers temperature. I lower mine to 310. We're again going to grab small globs of solder, but we're going to hold our piece completely vertical and we're going to dab it on just the top. We're trying to make a nice bead like we did on the interior of our piece. You're going to have to let the top cool before you rotate to do the next section. And we're just going to do this all the way around. I'm not the greatest at beading, so mine isn't perfectly smooth, but this is roughly what it will look like. Then I'm just going to use some small pieces of solder to clean up the intersections. And if there's parts that aren't 100% smooth that you would like to go over again, you can do this as well. If you turn down your iron, you're going to want to turn it back up to 400. Now this next step is optional, but it is necessary if you wanted to hang your piece. You're also going to need a thick glove for this step or some pliers that you can hold the wire with, as it does get really hot. We're going to grab our wire and then we're going to decide what we want the back of the piece to be, because that's where we're going to solder on our wire. Then we're going to choose 2 spots. It's better for these spots to be at an intersection, but this particular piece, we're going to have to do it on the edge. We're going to hold one side to where we want to solder it, and then we're going to grab our iron and get a small piece of solder. We're going to melt it on top. We want to melt it enough to where we're melting the solder beneath it so that the wire is inside all of that solder. We're then going to do this on the other side. You're going to want to make the solder on this side thick since it is going to be pulling on the copper tape. We want to make sure that there's a lot of solder holding it on there. Now I'm just checking over my piece, making sure everything is how I like it. After our piece is fully cooled down, we're going to take it over to our sink. I like to put soap directly on my piece. I use a scrubber to scrub it off. We're trying to get the solder and all the flux off. Make sure you use a scrubber that you're not using for your dishes. Once I've cleaned it, I just check for little pieces of solder over the glass, and you can get those off with your nail or pliers. And then you're going to use a cloth to fully dry it. Once our piece is all dried off, we're going to grab our wax and pour a generous amount on one side. And I use a microfiber cloth, but any cloth will do for this, and we're going to wipe it around You don't need to put a lot of pressure, we're just trying to get it all over the glass and all over the solder lines. And then we're going to flip it over and do the same to the other side. And then we're going to have to let this dry. I would give it about 2 hours before you go back and wax it off. Now, once our wax is dry, we're going to take that microfiber cloth again. You're going to use a decent amount of pressure and you're going to wipe in circles. We're trying to get all that wax off and we're trying to get that solder nice and shiny. And there we have our completed piece.